the pride and the passion, ever onward, ever upward to new heights. We see efforts to be beneath the mold, increased registration to get at the vote. Their representation has long been our aim. Election reform is the name of the game. Remember the pride and the passion of those who march for our rights. We will carry the pride and the passion, ever onward, ever upward to new heights. Well
done.
People think we are teaching but wrong. They know in their hearts we have power and gold. With passionate pride we will march to the fore and carry the banner 10,000 years more. Remember the pride and the passion.
Can't find
Peter, who made that? Moi.
it. Nice job.
Welcome, everybody, to the October meeting of the League of Women Voters, Leelanau County. My name is Vina Meixel, and I am president of the League. Our league became independent just over a year ago, and we joined 400 other leagues throughout the United States, studying issues, advocating for issues, informing voters about candidates, and getting out the vote. The league is nonpartisan. I need to say that again. The league is nonpartisan. We never, ever support parties or candidates. The Leelanau League currently has more than 100 men and women. To join the league, you must be 18 years of age or older and an American citizen. For more information about us, there are brochures on the table, and if you would like to be put on our list to be informed about events, please put your email address down legibly, so I can read it, and we will send you information about all the things we do. Oops, I found it. We've had a spectacular first year, as you saw in our video. Please take note of the candidate forums, which are going to be up there at some point. Well, anyway, they'll be up at the end. We hope you'll be able to attend some, if not all of these, as we decide who will be elected in November. There's a display back there on voter service, and it also lists the forums we will be having, as does this display of activities we've done over the past couple of years. Our first forum is one that we just learned is taking place on October 21st, probably at Lars Hogstad Auditorium, between Benešek, Cannon, and the Green Party candidate, whose name I can't recall. Bowl. It will be from 7 to 8:30, and we are co-sponsoring that forum with the League of Women Voters Grand Traverse area and IPR. So I hope everyone will be able to come. The fact that it's over at 8:30 means that you can get back home before it's too dark. The second one that we're sponsoring is in this room on October 22nd for the candidates for Commissioner in District 4 and District 5. And the next night, the same place for the candidates for Commissioners 2, 6, and 7 districts. And then on October 26th, we are sponsoring a forum in Northport at the Fire Hall for the Northport Village Council candidates. Also, we're going to have a printed voter's guide, which should be available very soon. It will be distributed to all of the libraries and clerk's offices at the county and township levels. This is published by the State League. It's free, and it lists all of our county and state candidates. We also advise you to go to vote411.org, where we have entered information about the candidates running at the county and state levels. Many of the candidates have entered information, and you'll see who has. when you go to that site. I know that we have one superintendent here. Chris Parker, would you stand up? This is the new superintendent at the Northport School District. I do not know if any other superintendent is here. They were all invited. Thank you very much for coming. Well, yeah. Thank you for coming. After our presentation, I hope all league members will stay for a business meeting as we finalize details for the forums. Guests are welcome to stay also. Leelanau County is the home of many retired teachers and administrators. The idea for the education program today and next month came from Henrietta Barnes. Henrietta is a former junior high school English teacher and a professor emeritus at MSU, where she was the chair of the Department of Teacher Education for 13 years. During her career, she was involved with numerous reform initiatives in the Lansing Public Schools, and as department chair, she had major responsibility for the total redesign of the MSU Teacher Education Program, which has been rated #1 by U.S. News and World Report for the last 14 years. Yes. Following her chairperson assignment, she spent 7 years working with teachers and MSU interns in the inner city schools of Flint, Michigan, and was involved in a 7-year effort to bring about total reform of that educational system. Henrietta was a seasonal resident in Northport for 30 years prior to moving here full-time in 2000. Henrietta is the moderator for our program. She will introduce our guest speaker. Henrietta?
Thank you. I want her to take her pages out so I don't give you the wrong lecture. But I'm so pleased to see so many of you here. I know you are probably as passionate about education as I have been all of my career. Anyone asks me a question about education, I get my soapbox out and step right up, and then they have to change the subject in order to get me to stop. But I care a lot about what's happening in public education, and I'm sure you do too, as I can see by how many are here today. But I am curious, how many of you have been or are now currently involved in some aspect of public education? Maybe a teacher, administrator, parapro, whatever. Lots of you. Keep your hands up for a minute, because I want to know how many have family members who were involved and are involved in some way. Wow, okay, so that's a few more. Okay, how many have been had parents of grandchildren and their own children in schools and have volunteered in schools, to work in schools? Well, there's a few more. How many are taxpayers? Okay. So all of us are very concerned about what's happening in education. And I know you are interested, some of you are very concerned about the direction that current reforms are taking, and we want to talk a little bit about that. Many of you have asked me, are you going to talk about X? Are you going to talk about this, some particular thing that they're concerned about? We hope to touch on many of these issues today, but we certainly can't go into any great depth on, at least the kind of depth that they really deserve. What we hope to do is to begin a two-part conversation with all of you today. It'll start to be today's program, which will focus more on the past and the present, what's going on in public education. And then on November 5th, we'll have the second part of the conversation, which will focus on the future, or possible futures that we can imagine for public education. And I hope that you'll be with us at that time too. Now, because of the time constraints, I don't like to do this, but I am going to read my remarks, and I'm going to ask you to hold your comments and questions until after our guest speaker has talked, and then we have some time there for interaction and discussion. And so if you can jot down your questions and hold them, we'd appreciate that. So as Fareed Zakaria would say, let's get started. It's my view that we can't talk about public education without talking about what we expect from school. I want to begin by asking all of you a question, and I want you to keep that question in mind. Are the original purposes of public education, reasons why people invested in public education, are they still guiding the goals of education today? Now when I first agreed to take this topic, I thought the answer to that question was no, that public education had been changing so much that we in fact were addressing different purposes of education. But after reviewing the research a little bit, and I couldn't go into very much depth, I'm not so sure anymore. So let me explain here. Public education has existed for a long time, and I was curious about when did it start, and maybe you've forgotten as well. It started in the 17th century. Boston Latin School was founded in 1635 and is both the first public school and the oldest existing school in the United States. It's still there, present. The first tax-supported school, a public school, was in Dedham, Massachusetts, and it still exists. I went on their website the other day, and it looks pretty good. All the New England colonies required towns to set up schools, and they were not totally free, but they were supported by tuition. By 1840, 3.68 million children between the ages of 5 and 15 were attending school. By 1900, 34 states had compulsory school education, or laws. By 1910, 72% of the nation's children attended school. By 1918, every state required students to complete elementary education. By 1920, 2 million students aged 14 to 17 were enrolled in secondary schools, so it's really growing. But today, we have 49.8 students attending public schools. 35.1 million of them are in elementary school, and 14.7 are in grade school. And then I read an interesting item that said that we are rapidly approaching a $1 trillion industry in education. It now ranks as 10% of the national gross product. So that's a significant effort, and it may explain part of the reason why so many for-profit schools are interested in getting into this field. But expectations for schools have also grown over time, but the belief that an educated citizenry was essential for democracy continues to be fundamental and undergirds the whole enterprise. We haven't changed that purpose. Thomas Jefferson is credited, as you all know, and I'm just reminding you, I know you all know this, and he defended this purpose in letters and official papers, and what he said was, I love this quote, that education in America should be dedicated to planting and nurturing the tree of liberty in every educated American heart. He reasoned that an educated, self-governing electorate would be the greatest defense against all forms of tyranny. And I've added both domestic as well as foreign. And I was thinking about last month's league presentation on the effects of money in politics. And I substituted the words, the effects of money in education. That's in how is money being used, both to support or not support public education and to support other forms of education. So it's an interesting question, I think. Equally critical to him and to other early educators, however, was the goal that every citizen should have the knowledge, skills, moral attitudes, social values needed to function with intelligence and integrity in a productive society. Values of industriousness, responsibility, honesty, care, and respect were emphasized as students were taught to read, write, and compute. Development of full persons who could take their place as productive citizens was of equal importance to the curriculum of skills and knowledge that students were expected to learn. Contrast that as we think about the purposes of education. Gradually, the purpose of public education were expanded, and society needs changed, and schools were seen as a vehicle for bringing about and meeting society's challenges. For example, when the number of immigrants increased dramatically to 700,000 between 1865 and 1914, schools took on the role of assimilating hundreds of children into the American mainstream culture. When training for skilled jobs was needed, the Smith-Hughes Act provided federal funds for agriculture and vocational education, And as other societal needs were identified, schools took on more and more of these responsibilities, and making the job of achieving the original goals increasingly more difficult. And that trend has I think, grown by leaps and bounds in the last few years. I won't go into the many ways that schools have changed in an attempt to meet these ever-expanding goals, but I want to return to my first question. Have the purposes of public education changed? So let's see. We still want an educated citizenry dedicated to and capable of our democratic way of life. We still want citizens who can conduct business, avoid being cheated, make reasoned judgments. We still want students who are creative, enjoy the arts and can perform in them, can flexibly respond to ever-changing circumstances, and can create their own futures. We still want what is best for kids. So what has changed? Why are so many alarmed about the educational reforms we're seeing today? What is different about these reforms, or are they different? So let's look at reforms for a minute. Since the beginning of public education, there have always been critics. For more than a century, we've seen the pendulum swing from reformers who complained that schools were obsolete, backward, mindless, rigid, out of step with the demands of the modern world, and the progressive form of education that was introduced and continued for a long time. Then they swung to reformers who said the schools had grown soft. The standards and curriculum had collapsed, and students were not learning what they used to learn. And then they swung back to reformers who once again condemned schools, saying they were too academic, stifling students by their routine and dreary assignments. To criticisms more recently that the nation was at risk because of a rising tide of mediocrity, and we could go on from there. But regardless of the nature of their criticisms, reformers most often argued for stronger curricula, better prepared teachers, better funding, smaller classes, special programs for disadvantaged groups, and other ways to improve students' learning. That is no longer the case. What has changed are the strategies that reformers are promoting today that they believe are essential for improving students' learning, and how those results of those strategies are being used also, they believe, to improve student learning. Current federal and state legislative initiatives represent a major departure from the educational reforms of the past, and that's part of what we want to talk about today. For the first time, the emphasis is not on strengthening the resources available to educators to deal with the complexities of schooling. In fact, we've seen those shrinking, but on establishing a system of accountability and competition that's thought to hold the key to improving students' learning. You see the different point of view that's being introduced. It is different, but I do believe that the purposes are still the same. So do current reforms represent a change in the purposes of education? I would have to say probably not. Not in terms of the goals we have for maintaining our democratic way of life and preparing students for an increasingly complex world. But I would also have to say that current educational reforms are so dramatically altering our expectations for how to improve student learning that they represent a potential threat to public education. There's a very real possibility, and I'm saying it's only a possibility because we want to examine this question, that the major changes that these reforms are mandating may change public education so fundamentally that the original purposes of public education might be compromised, or the nonprofit public education that we've known in the past may cease to exist. Fortunately, we have an educator here today who's deeply involved in these issues, and he's willing to talk with us about them. This is Mike Hill, who is well known for his work as superintendent of the 5-county Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District. He has held several various positions in the Traverse Bay region, including being a social studies teacher, a high school principal, assistant school principal. He served on several boards and has volunteers as a youth coach in football, baseball, and basketball. Very talented guy. In 2005, this is very important, Mike led an initiative in the Traverse City area to secure a grant of over $1.5 million to construct and operate a youth health and wellness center serving students ages 10 to 21 who may not have access to affordable quality health care. And, maybe this is the most important thing, his daughter was just named the homecoming queen of Glen Lake. And today, Mike has agreed to talk with us about federal and state reform initiatives that are enacted by the state legislature and discuss the current status and issues confronting public education today. So I'm very pleased to introduce Mike Hill.
Who gave you that tip?
Your friend in the back of the room.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm so honored to be here. And I wasn't nervous driving up from Traverse City until the county administrator walked into this room. He was a longtime friend of mine, and then a role model for me in education, Mary Crickson, walked in, who I had the opportunity to work with, and just so respect her. Ty is here, one of my former colleagues, as a superintendent and employee, and Chris, welcome. Great addition to the county, to the region, a real asset to education. Henrietta and Vina, thank you so much for this opportunity. To the league, thank you for all you do. And to Joe, thank you for helping me with the slides. I've been in this region for 26 proud years. And I started at Leland School as a social studies teacher for 4 years, then went to Glen Lake for 7. And this is my 15th year with the Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District. I love this region. I came here in 1988, and in 1991, I was blessed to marry a Polish princess outside of Cedar by the last name of Klinsky. You may know that name. And we are proud parents of 2 children. One is a junior at the University of Michigan, studying medicine. And Madison, our senior, is going to Michigan State to be a vet. So we will have a divided house, which is okay. But we are proud parents of children who have succeeded in public education. Succeeded. And we're very proud of that. Sorry, Jason, Dr. Jeffrey, my colleague, can't be here today. He has had to stay back, and he's a great guy, very intelligent, but he right now is dealing with a very serious and sensitive personnel issue within our organization. And it was disappointing that I had to ask him to stay back and do some interviews with the media regarding this situation. So our apologies. I'll try my very best to cover his part of it, which is a lot of data. And I've been studying, not on the way up, but a little bit this morning. So if we could advance to the first slide, I'd like to talk a little bit. I know this is very small, but if you'll see here to the left, the vision of the Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District is for this region to have the best educational system in the world. We adopted that 8 years ago. We know that is very, very bold and out there. And I get teased all the time by my colleagues across the state. Hey, Mr. World. Hey, Mr. Globe. How you doing? But we wanted it to be bold. And we believe if we have the best water, the best wine, the best sand, the best food, the best medical care, why can't we have the best educational system in the world? And so that's what we're shooting for, step by step, with great humility, to try and get that region there. And our mission is leading lifetime learning. From pre-birth to death. We run adult education for 10 counties, and I handed an 85-year-old World War II veteran his GED 2 years ago. Doesn't get any better than that. So we go from pre-birth to educating parents to death. That's what we do for the 5 counties. So if we go to the next slide. So let's talk about some general information. What is an intermediate school district? We were founded, 56 of us across the state, in 1962. So we're 52 years old, and our role, our function is to be a conduit between the Michigan Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, and local school districts. And the duties that we perform within the Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District, our largest division is within special education, educating students with disabilities. Now, we have 550 total employees and a $66 million budget. And our largest division is in special education, 320 employees. Center-based programs in Traverse City, number 13. You see one of 40 buses going around the region, busing students into very challenging center-based programs that local districts really, because of the size and the minimum amount of students, can't operate financially on their own. So all of us in the room support special education with 2 mills, by paying 2 mills. And that covers about half of that budget in special education, which is about $42 million. We also send itinerant staff members out to 16 K-12 districts, 13 private parochials, and 6 charter schools within the 5 counties. Those are physical therapists, speech therapists, psychologists, social workers, and they're going out working with districts and teams. And so we have 2 primary functions within special education. And if you are, or you know a parent of a special needs student, you'll know that that service is invaluable. And we take such great pride in educating those students. Our second largest division is our Career Tech Center. Our award-winning Career Tech Center on Parsons Road in Traverse City, home to 1,100 juniors and seniors, 11th and 12th graders from throughout the 5 counties. All of us support our Career Tech Center, and this is the primary funding source for career and technical education by paying 0.73 of a mill. In 1974, when we passed that charter millage, it was 1 mill, but we've rolled it down to 0.7.